もうすぐ君の待つ両国へ。千代ちゃん、この中を突っ切っていくのか。いい女、いけるぞ。あと1メートル。
あなた、その格好は何ですの？
Last time on Prison School, everyone's jaws dropped in horror as Mari's skirt was ripped off. The crime of removing Mari's skirt from below by Gakuto results in severe punishment from the vice president, who is enraged by his actions. Furthermore, crows flock to attack him, leaving Gakuto injured and lying prone on the floor. In contrast, Mari nonchalantly leaves the scene and returns to the USC office. Gakuto eventually returns to the cell, and the other boys notice that Meiko has clipped his precious long locks from his head. Secretly, Gakuto presents his cut hair to Kiyoshi in his bag and explains that it will serve as a wig, as Kiyoshi's original disguise seems dubious. With only one night left before his breakout, Mayumi and Chio are in the girls' dorm. While Chio talks about the tournament, Mayumi pays little attention to her interest in sumo wrestlers. At noon, as the breakout occurs, Kiyoshi quickly heads to the restroom. He then utilizes the sewer system to exit the drainage channel near the girls' dormitory. To avoid detection, he decides to disguise himself as a female student and uses Gakuto's hair as a wig. However, while attempting to remain inconspicuous, a strand of hair falls near the USC vice president, raising suspicion. As she approaches Kiyoshi's location, he rushes to put on the girl's outfit, but accidentally tears the blazer. Panicking, he cleverly conceals the tear by covering it with his bag. Meiko glances out, but assuming Kiyoshi is a regular student, she doesn't notice anything unusual. As he walks towards the school gate, he reassures himself. However, just as he reaches the gate, the USC president grabs his bag. At first, he thinks he's been caught, but he's surprised when Mari points out that he's wearing his uniform incorrectly. When Mari lifts the bag, a tear in the uniform is revealed, leading her to believe that he was trying to hide it. He apologizes and leaves the school, but Mari still seems suspicious. At the sumo festival, Kiyoshi meets up with Chio and they enjoy each other's company. They begin by relishing the food that Chio had prepared. After taking a selfie together, Kiyoshi excuses himself to go to the toilet. As he takes his time, Chio accidentally spills water on his bag. Upon inspection, she notices that there is a girl's uniform in the bag. Surprised, she questions Kiyoshi about it, but feeling ashamed and embarrassed, she quickly leaves without explaining. Kiyoshi is left confused until he realizes with horror that the uniform belongs to Chio. In despair, he decides to leave the festival and head back to school. Elsewhere on school grounds, Shingo speaks with Gakuto about Kiyoshi's absence, suspecting he's skipping work. Gakuto is alarmed as Shingo decides to verify Kiyoshi's whereabouts. Meanwhile, in the chairman's office, Mari and the chairman are discussing the boys' impending release when they both receive a text and become distracted. At the entrance to the toilet block, Gakuto and Shingo are interrupted by Meiko's arrival, who kicks Shingo because she hasn't seen him. Despite Gakuto's horror, Meiko asks Kiyoshi to leave the cubicle, but there is no response due to the flat battery on the speaker. As a result, Meiko forcefully kicks the door with no response from Kiyoshi, leaving Gakuto to watch in terror. As Meiko kicked down the door, she and the two boys immediately spotted Kiyoshi in tears on the toilet. After assuming that his absence was due to hemorrhoids and truancy, Meiko and Shingo promptly departed. Meanwhile, Gakuto rushed to Kiyoshi's side, overjoyed that he had returned just in time. However, when Gakuto heard Kiyoshi's self-deprecating comments and saw that he was still crying, he wrongly assumed that Kiyoshi had not brought the limited edition figurines and shouted at him to leave. Fortunately, Kiyoshi revealed that he had indeed brought the figurines, which greatly pleased Gakuto. Nevertheless, Kiyoshi had not mentioned his failed date to Gakuto, who decided to discuss it later in order to avoid attracting attention. As Kiyoshi and Gakuto exit the toilet building, they are approached by Mari, flanked by Meiko and Shingo. Mari queries Kiyoshi about his enjoyment of the sumo match, much to their horror. Kiyoshi feigns ignorance, but Mari produces a photo of Kiyoshi and Chiyo together that shocks Kiyoshi. Mari discloses that Chiyo is her younger sister, and astutely surmises that Kiyoshi's escape involved cross-dressing. Meiko inspects Kiyoshi's bag and discovers not only Gakuto's hair, but also Chiyo's uniform, which was used as the disguise. Mari expresses disgust and departs before Meiko, who informs Kiyoshi that his punishment will be severe, since he not only escaped, but also defiled Mari's sister. Meanwhile, the other boys who overheard the conversation are outraged, as their sentence has been extended. Shingo punches Kiyoshi in the face, screams at him while he is on the ground, and has to be restrained by Andre. Shingo, Andre, and Joe then leave in disgust, abandoning Gakuto and Kiyoshi. A despondent Kiyoshi is then placed in the detention room for solitary confinement and warned that he will be interrogated. At USC's room, Mari asks Kiyoshi to fill out an expulsion request for his own good. She warns him that stories about him stealing a uniform and cross-dressing will spread quickly, leading to him being labeled a pervert throughout his high school years. Despite Meiko's intimidation tactics, Mari stops her from taking things too far. Just as Kiyoshi is about to comply with the request, Chiyo enters the room and argues that it's unfair to kick him out of school. Chiyo even threatens to leave the school if Kiyoshi is expelled. During a scuffle with Meiko, Chiyo inadvertently presses Kiyoshi's head against her breasts. Despite Mari's initial resistance, she concedes when Kiyoshi refuses to sign the expulsion request and hopes for redemption. Kiyoshi decides to stay in school, but he returns to the prison to find that he's been shunned by the other boys, led by Shingo. Upon Hana's return to the USC's office, Mari and Meiko eagerly share their plan, Operation Boys Expulsion, which aims to get rid of the boys by instigating 3 separate breakouts. In order to accomplish this, the USC intends to manipulate the boys into creating problems, causing the student body and faculty to turn against them, and ultimately leading to their expulsion. Initially, Mari uses the phrase Operation DTO, but Hana quickly corrects her to simply DTO. With Shingo's resentment towards Kiyoshi and the internal turmoil among the boys, the USC decides to proceed with the DTO. After completing their work detail, Shingo is held back by Meiko instead of returning to the prison block. Firstly, Meiko offers him cake and then assigns him a personal task at the guard office. Meanwhile, Kiyoshi tells Gakuto that he can endure their exclusion without his help in the boys' changing area. However, Gakuto feels ashamed and leaves the shower when Shingo returns. The next day at work, the boys, except for Shingo and Andre, are heavily beaten. Later, in the mess hall of the prison block, Joe nearly beats up Andre for pushing his ant farm over, but Kiyoshi and Gakuto restrain him. In the guard office that day, Shingo meets the vice president and unintentionally tells her about the previous day's incidents and the rising tension between the boys. Meiko blackmails him into becoming her informant before allowing him to leave. Subsequently, Meiko reports to Mari about Joe's protective attitude towards his aunts, and Mari decides to include Joe's aunts in their plan to increase the boys' stress. Before we continue, take a moment to answer the question of the day. What is the best ecchi moment in anime? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out, and now, back to the recap. When the boys take their lunch break the next day, they head to the courtyard of the prison block. Joe and Andre both apologize for their behavior, and the boys start playing. However, Kiyoshi is still being ignored and decides to nap alone. While he is dozing off, Kiyoshi notices a large flock of crows in the sky and the unusual presence of all 3 USC members leaning against the wall. He also notices Shingo talking quietly with Meiko under the trees. After their conversation, Shingo calls Joe away from his aunts by pretending to have a math problem. Suddenly, Joe realizes that the crows are attacking his aunts. He tries to reach them, but Meiko blocks his path and forbids him from touching Mari's crows. Joe pushes her aside in desperation, only to be kicked to the ground by Hana. At the nurse's office, Kiyoshi cleans his wound alone on the hospital bed. After removing his pants, Hana demands that he urinates in front of her as revenge. Despite Kiyoshi's resistance, Hana stands up and urinates on him. Suddenly, Chiyo enters the room and they hide under the bed. Chiyo pulls the curtains, revealing them in close proximity and exposing their lower halves. Kiyoshi becomes stiff with discomfort and excitement, causing Hana embarrassment. When Chiyo leaves, Kiyoshi tries to apologize but realizes that she has fainted. While at his office, the chairman receives an online delivery package. Suddenly, Mari arrives to report Joe's incident. Firstly, the chairman points out that she has disproportioned the situation. Secondly, his office phone rings on his desk, but he stays seated on the chair as he is hiding a fetish mousepad. Thirdly, Mari questions him about his strange behavior, and he finally leaves to respond to the call while physically concealing the package in an effort to disguise it. Meanwhile, Mari saw the mouse on the chair which had fallen out of the unsealed box. Upon the chairman's return, he discovers that she has seen the mousepad and he attempts to make excuses. However, she feigns indifference and leaves with a slam of the door. In the corridor, an enraged Mari concludes that DTO must be intensified. At the guard office, Shingo is confused and questions Meiko about his role, expressing his suspicion that Joe was set up by the USC. Despite his concerns, Meiko threatens to reveal his betrayal to the other boys and exposes the fact that he had eaten their food. The next day, Joe is released from solitary confinement and intervenes when Shingo tries to bully Kiyoshi during the prisoner's work break, instructing him to fetch water. After the incident, Joe thanks Kiyoshi for his help, and they have a casual conversation, although Kiyoshi can't share his suspicion about Shingo's involvement in the strange events leading up to it. Despite Hana's suspicions about Kiyoshi due to their previous encounter, she has forgotten their time together under the bed. Later, when Shingo is taken to the guard office, she informs him that he now has permission to leave campus for 2 hours of free time and issues him his uniform. How will our boy use the opportunity? Will he make a run for it? Find out on our next recap of Prison School.